Best-selling memory product on the market. No prescription necessary. Available at Walgreens, Rite Aid, and CVS.
News Radio 1070 WKOK presents On the Mark. It's a chance to voice your opinion on the events that affect life in the Susquehanna Valley. Call 1-800-795-9565 or email onthemark@wkok.com. Now, here are your hosts for On the Mark, Joe McGranahan and Than Mitchell.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome on board On the Mark.
Got it right.
Yes, you did get it right.
Got it right.
Brought to you by the Sunbury Motor Company, a family-owned dealership since 1915. 4 streets in Sunbury, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Find out lots more about them at www.sunburymotors.com. We have a partial open day, and we have a guest later on that I know you're going to have some questions for, so our toll-free hotline number is available to you, 1-800-795-9565. It's brought to you by the Groninger Insurance Agency, located at Front and Duke Streets in Northumberland. They're open Monday through Thursday, 9 to 5. Friday 9 to 4:30, and Saturday by appointment. Find them on the web at www.groningerinsurance.com. If you choose to email us, as so many people have, we have quite a few unread emails from yesterday, which we'll try to get to in the latter part of the program. Our email in basket is onthemark@wkok.com, and it's brought to you by Lenape Solar, 140 South 2nd Street in Sunbury. You can call them at 570-286-1496 or find them on the web at www.lenapesolar.com. Harness the power of the sun. Harness the power of the sun for a brighter tomorrow. Let Lenape Solar give you a hand in that regard.
You can tell you've been around in the radio business for a long time.
I've been making mistakes for many years. Welcome on board the program this morning. We had a chance yesterday morning, bright and early, we even had to get here early to do it, to record an interview with Governor Tom Corbett. Governor Corbett was at his home in western Pennsylvania. I don't know whether he was in his jammies at that hour or not, but he was up and at 'em and talking to us. And
I'll bet not. I'll bet he was dressed, and he probably had been someplace in the morning. It is that season when you have to go out and meet everybody at the factory at 6.
Well, his staff told us we could have 10 minutes with him. We wound up taking just a bit more than that. He answered our questions. He said a few things about State Representative Fred Keller, and Representative Keller said a few things about him. But all in all, it was an excellent interview with the governor. And we promised this morning we would start the program with it, and that's exactly what we're going to do. If the world's greatest producer, Kevin Herr, is ready, we'll listen to Governor Corbett's interview. Good morning, Governor Corbett. I'm Joe McGranahan, and with me is Than Mitchell, and we thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us this morning.
Well, thank you, Joe. It's nice to be with you.
And we have lots of questions for you, Governor, and sometimes we ask them at the same time.
Time for all the questions, I'll bet.
Okay.
Well, Governor, you have had a busy week. You have signed the bill, or the budget, but vetoed parts of it and substantial parts of it. You have acquired some animosity from your fellow Republicans. One of our state representatives up here, Fred Keller, suggested you might want to sign the budget with crayons, indicating that you might be a little petulant over the fact that you didn't get pension reform. So how's this week playing out from your view, Governor?
I think it's been a very good week because people of Pennsylvania certainly understand what we're talking about. This isn't just the issue of reducing the budget. It deals with property tax and reducing the property taxes to the people of Pennsylvania. That's what pension reform is all about. But let's go back to the budget first for a second, because part of the reduction of that budget, if you look at it closely, was reducing money that was being held by the legislature in a reserve. They have $150 million in reserve. That's 6 months of money sitting there that could be used if the governor in a budget was closing down government, wasn't agreeing to a budget so that they could pay their people. That's the taxpayers' money, and I think the taxpayers understand that. And traditionally, there had been 3 months of reserves put in there, and they upped it to 6 months. Now, in addition to that, this budget was originally finalized by the legislature with the understanding of higher revenues than what we projected and what we recommended. And in fact, what the Independent Fiscal Office that the legislature created recommended. And the reduction that we did is back to the levels of revenue that we anticipate would come in during the next fiscal year. So we're trying to be a little less optimistic, but still optimistic as compared to the legislature. But it was my opinion that we shouldn't be having $150 million sitting there, so we reduced the spending. It would have been nice if I could have taken that, half of that money, the $72 million, and put it wherever I wanted to, because we could have put it into places like education, like taking care of individuals with severe disabilities who actually sit on waiting lists, like economic development or tourism and everything. So I know there are representatives upset, and I know that Fred was upset, but you have to look at the much bigger picture, and getting into little descriptions like Fred's, that's uncalled for. I'm just going to ignore it.
Well, I can't say that I would appreciate that if I were in your position either. But pension reform is a big issue, and as a mayor of a local community, I know what pensions do to municipal budgets. But I'm concerned about how you handle this, Governor. What is your plan? I mean, you didn't like the one, or supposedly the House and Senate didn't like the one you came up with. Is it possible to get some pension reform, and if so, what form is it likely to take?
Well, I think it's going to be an evolving one. The one that I wanted to take was a real serious reform, talking about the entire system, not taking away anything from retirees at all, not taking anything away that has already been earned by existing employees, but changing it in the future going forward. And nobody in the legislature wanted to deal with that one. Nobody would introduce it, and it was a tough one. We probably would have gotten into litigation, and then I was willing to do that, but in this case, nobody else was. So there are a number of different bills that are out there. The one that has the most support right now is the one by Representative Camp, with the one that has an amendment on it that would allow some changes and make it into a hybrid system. And that is extremely important to me as a starting point, where new employees coming in would be able to have a defined benefit program, which is traditional, up until $50,000, and then it would switch over to a defined contribution program for anything earned above $50,000. A lot of people in the state employee ranks are below that $50,000 level, and so they wouldn't really see anything different coming in. But there are a lot of employees and a lot of teachers that get above that $50,000 level, and it would only apply to the new employees, and they'd have a hybrid plan. It's a starting point. It's something, as you know, you have to find compromise. Where can we get the body politic to come to an agreement? Now, we're close. We're close in the House. We don't have quite enough Republican votes, and I know people say, well, the Republicans control the House. Well, you can't force Republicans to vote in different ways. The ability to get votes that other governors had, called WHAMs, I campaigned against. I won't use WHAMs to buy votes. And maybe people think we should have continued that practice, but I thought that was an inappropriate practice.
Go ahead.
We have Republicans. What's to be noted is there's not one Democrat vote for pension reform. Not one. Now, as you know, there's a pension problem. $50 billion underfunded right now. It'll be going to $65 billion in a few years. In 17-18, our pension contribution for teachers, for state employees and legislators and judges is going to be $3.3 billion. That tells you we have a pension problem.
Boy, it certainly does tell you we have a pension problem, but we are also short of money in the state, Governor. This is Stan Mitchell on the other side of the desk, and I'm wondering where we're going to stand on taxing the fracking in one way or another, whatever the word might be that we use. Are we going to extract some taxes from these people who are taking our resources from under our feet?
Well, Zan, let's talk about it this way. We already do. We tax them like we tax any other corporation. We've received over $2 billion in taxes from the industry and the related industries that have developed. More importantly, we have more jobs in Pennsylvania than since 2008, and a great deal of that has to do with the industry. And it's not the fracking industry; it's the natural gas industry, and it's a much bigger industry than just the process. But let's talk about being open to taking a look at additional, what you're saying, revenues. Now, right now, we're the only state in the union that has an impact fee on that industry. And that impact fee has brought in over $626 million in 3 years. No other state has that. 63% of that money goes directly back to the communities affected. And in fact, to every county, even though they're not affected, even down to Philadelphia County. The rest stays in the state to deal with preparing for the industry, for safety issues, and a number of other areas that are related to developing this as an industry. And so if you go and talk to municipalities and you go and talk to counties that are receiving that impact fee, they're not such a big fan of just saying, okay, we're going to put another tax. This would be a completely separate tax on this industry. It would be like saying if you have a product that's being made solely in Sunbury, well, there should be an additional tax there. There should be an additional tax, let's say on farmers, because they're making money on corn, which we know is pretty hard to do. And I'm not defending the industry. What I'm looking at is the overall economic concept of how we build the new jobs of the 21st century, and we are building that. Now, that being said, I was open to discussions if we got things done, including pension, and there wasn't one Democrat vote to try and even get there. Nope. Cross their arms. Nope, we're not going to give a vote for pensions. There's not a pension crisis. In fact, Mr. Wolf says repeatedly, there's not a pension crisis.
Well, let's talk about Mr. Wolf for a minute. The latest poll I saw still shows you about 20 to 25 points behind, depending on whether or not you believe in polls. How do you plan to close that gap?
Well, first off, we have to get our message out because it's been very difficult to get past certain elements of the media that's out there. The great story that we have of how much has been accomplished in the last 3.5 years. In fact, we have to, if we can complete pensions and liquor privatization, my goodness, the record we have in 4 years. But we have a great record, and look at it just from this standpoint. And as we get this message out, unemployment today is 5.6% in the state. When I came into office, it was 8.1%. Jobs are coming to Pennsylvania. We're moving in the right direction. That has to be made known. And on the other hand, with Mr. Wolf, nobody really knows what he stands for. His commercial was a cute little commercial talking about driving Jeeps around and everything, and he got his name out there and spent a lot of money in advertising. I also take a look at only 18% of the electorate in the primary came out to vote. So, right now it's us getting our message out there and us making sure that people understand that Mr. Wolf is very much completely different than I am and very much like the prior administration. In fact, I see Mr. Wolf in pictures with Governor Rendell on a regular basis, and a lot of people working with him have worked or have consulted with him with Governor Rendell before. So it's not, as he would say, a fresh start. It's a return to the past.
Well, Governor, the first time I heard you speak, it was at the State Broadcasters Convention right after you were elected, and you said that the difference between you and Governor Rendell is that he was out in front of the cameras every day, and you'd be in your office working, trying to accomplish something for the state. You've, by and large, kept that commitment. Do you regret it now? Would you have done anything differently?
No, you can't change human nature in the way people are wired, and I'm wired. Let's sit down and let's get the job done. I'll give you an example, and I'm glad you bring that up. The refineries that were going to close down in Philadelphia. People were complaining, you're not out there enough, you're not talking about it enough. I was working to solve the problem. And as you know, we solved the problem. We saved probably about 18,000 jobs overall, direct and indirect, down in the Philadelphia region. And we kept gasoline being produced in Philadelphia that helps almost all of Pennsylvania. I'm one, let me do my job. I'm going to get this job done. And look at the results. That's where we have to go out there, and I hope the people think about it, that we've gotten the job done. We're much better off today than we were 4 years ago. Part of the problem was I inherited a $4.2 billion deficit. We have eliminated that, and we have not raised anybody's taxes.
Governor, it has been a difficult couple of years for you, not getting through the liquor privatization or the gambling. But if you get another term, what accomplishments are you fairly sure you can get done in the next few years?
Well, I don't know that anybody can be fairly sure what they're going to get done with legislatures. Okay.
Good point. Take a guess.
It's a real unique animal, as you know. I think we need to stay on the path of keeping our costs low, attracting businesses. I think you're going to see a great deal of businesses coming to Pennsylvania. I'm at home, in my home in Pittsburgh today. In southwestern Pennsylvania, I believe we're going to see Shell, that Shell create an ethylene cracker facility out here, and finally announce it. They're pretty far down the road doing it, but announce it that it's going to provide tens of thousands of jobs in southwestern Pennsylvania and then growing across Pennsylvania. What I think we're seeing now with reaching out and developing the industry, developing the natural gas industry along with coal and bringing down our costs, you're going to see a reindustrialization in the 21st century, 21st industry here in Pennsylvania. And what does that mean? We're going to be providing jobs to the people of Pennsylvania.
Well, Governor Tom Corbett, we appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. You promised us 10 minutes. You've given us a bit more than that. We thank you very much for being with us today and for answering our questions very, very forthrightly and straightforwardly, and we appreciate that. And I'll look forward to seeing you Thursday night at the State Mayor's Conference.
I won't be at the Mayor's Conference, Governor, but thank Kirsten for helping us get this interview. We do appreciate that very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You all have a good day.
You too, Governor. And that was Governor Tom Corbett from yesterday. We were fortunate enough to have him give us some time to talk about where the issues are in the campaign and where Pennsylvania is from his viewpoint. I had a call yesterday afternoon from State Representative Fred Keller, who said, Joe, I heard you had an interview with the governor this morning, and Fred wanted to know what we talked about. And I did mention that I had brought up Fred's name in connection with his crayon comment and what the governor had said. And I don't want to speak for Fred because he indicated he might call in after the governor's interview this morning, but he has his viewpoint, and I don't think he's angry with the governor based on what he said yesterday, that he just didn't think that was an appropriate comment on the governor's part.
Well, I think, too, that Fred's original comment was in frustration, because Fred really can see what he wants to have done, and he thought the governor should sign the budget, and it just upset him terribly. The governor didn't. I imagine.
Well, it was on pension reform. I mean, that's the sticking point with the governor. That's the sticking point with the legislature. I mean, Fred's point was the legislature did a lot of work on pension reform, and the governor's leadership, as I think he put it, shouldn't just be get it done. It should be more involved. We'll take a break, let's see, what time is it here?
Whatever time it is.
I forgot what time it was. 9 minutes up. I forgot about that. Thank you for reminding me. Kevin, our greatest producer, didn't put that up here. We'll take a break and on the mark, and then we'll be back, and either we'll have a phone call that we will take from Representative Keller, who indicated he might call in, or we'll talk to our guest. We'll be right back.
The dog days of summer are here.
And that means one thing.
When the temperatures go up, the prices come down. At Sunbury Motors Kia. If you like it hot, there's the Race Sleek 2014 Optima starting at $20,860 with 0% financing for up to 60 months.
That's hot.
Or the iconic Hip Hamster Soul from $14,990. Let's not forget Kia's award-winning SUV, the 2015 Sorento, with rebates and discounts up to $4,000 starting at $22,913. Remember, all new Kias come with a 10-year, 100,000-mile limited powertrain warranty with 85 new vehicles to choose from. The hottest deals on the hottest cars in all of Central PA are at Sunbury Motors Kia on the Strip in Hummels Wharf or at sunburymotors.com. Selling more cars, satisfying more customers since 1915.
Tax and tags extra. All applicable Kia customer rebates apply. KMF bonus cash financing to well-qualified customers.
This is one of 2 days in the calendar year where there are no games scheduled. What will we talk about? Well, this will test all of our broadcast skills today. 3 to 5, Steve Jones Show, WKOK.
Welcome back to On the Mark, and we do have State Representative Fred Keller on the phone with us this morning. Good morning, Fred. How are you today?
How are you?
Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Uh-oh, we got a problem here, Fred. We can hardly hear you. You're breaking up. Where are you calling from? Siberia?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now I can hear you now.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, you're in business. Are you on your way to Harrisburg?
I'll just pull to the side of the road here and talk to you.
Hey, listen, Fred, you're my representative. Please, anytime you're on the cell phone, pull to the side of the road. We need to keep you around.
I have hands-free. Hands-free, Sam.
Okay, good.
So you heard the governor's interview, Fred. Your name, of course, came up. Give us your view.
Well, actually, I think that there's been a couple items. I mean, I've been very supportive of what we've accomplished in Pennsylvania. I think we've done a lot of good things. I don't think it's unhealthy sometimes for people to have a disagreement on some things. I think there were a couple points maybe the governor and I disagreed on some stuff. But we can come together and work to get some things done here. The pension bill that the governor spoke about, and that's an item. And Stan, I've been talking about this for 3 years on the show.
Yes.
What we need to do about pensions. It's not just this year, but I've been advocating for this for a very long period of time, and I know the governor referenced a bill that he had trouble getting introduced. That did have co-sponsors on it, and we did move it. In fact, I was one that was very instrumental in getting some people around to discuss that bill. Unfortunately, we didn't get enough people that wanted to do that. So, we're looking at some other items. But, I think the important takeaway is the fact that, no two people agree on 100% of the items. And, we should be able to, respect each other's differences and move forward and work. And I think that's where the governor's coming from, and that's certainly where I'm coming from.
That sounds like the right thing to say, Fred, but has he created any animosity with other members of the House and Senate that might make it more difficult for them to support him?
Well, I'm going to say this. There's not animosity with me. I mean, like I said, we just disagree on this item. So let me first clear that up.
Okay.
But I'm not going to speak for how other members of the General Assembly feel with the governor. I mean, you'll have to talk to them on that. But I'm as I always have. Listen to the people in my district, and I know the governor mentioned that it's difficult to work with the legislature. Understand that the state is very diverse, and there's everybody's representing their district. So you need to come together and get consensus. And I think at the end of the day, or I'm hopeful at the end of the day, we'll be able to do that.
We heard him talk about his view of what's possible with pension reform. Do you agree with that, or do you see it some other way?
Well, I know there's the Tobash bill out there, and that seems to be the one that has the most push behind it. That was a bill that I wanted to see some amendments to, and I got the amendments filed, and the majority leader and the governor were instrumental in making sure that we got the perk notes, which is required for any kind of legislation that deals with pensions, done for those, so that they can be considered, because I felt there were just a couple tweaks that needed to happen to make that system a little more equitable for everybody on from the low end of the scale to the higher end of the scale. But I think it's possible we can get. We need to. I mean, it's here again. I go back to what Winston Churchill said. Sometimes it's not. You don't just do your best. You do what's necessary. And I think it's sort of necessary that we come together and we get something done for the people of the Commonwealth.
I always like what our chief engineer used to say here, Harry. He used to say, "Some days you eat the bear, some days the bear eats you."
Yeah, but the whole point with this is, we need to have the dialogue. We need to get it done. And anything that we're talking about, the bill we're talking about now, first off, does not impact anybody, and nothing ever impacted anybody that was already retired or any benefit already earned.
Okay.
Nothing never impacted benefits earned or what's retired or anybody retired. The one did do a little tweak with future benefits of current employees, but that's the one the governor talked about that would have ended up in litigation. But again, nothing ever did anything with retirees. The bill we're looking at now is simply future hires.
Okay.
That's all we're looking at. People that have not even been hired yet. So for people to say, well, we're losing something, it may not look the same as the pension system does now, but here's our goal. We need to protect the benefits that have already been earned. And I say it that way. They've already been earned. We need to protect those benefits. We need to make sure that people coming into the system have a method to save for the retirement while keeping in mind it has to be something that the taxpayers can afford. And I would agree with the statement that the Tobash bill is a place to get started and get going on it. So, we've got a lot of work ahead of us. I look forward to getting that done. I look forward to hearing opinions from everybody, on what their thoughts are. And, I've actually, on the pension issue, a year ago, but a little more than a year ago, I actually even went into the different school districts to talk to people about pensions because it is an important issue. And whenever you take a stand on an issue, there's going to be people on both sides of it, and we just need to. And it's just need to make sure that we get the work done. And I think at the end of the day, I'm hopeful at the end of the day we'll be able to come up with something that'll be a good product.
Well, let me ask you this question. The governor mentioned, and I know you're a fiscal conservative, that he thought it would be a lot easier in dealing with the legislature and getting things passed if he still had access to WAMS money, which he decided wasn't a very good thing. And he said maybe some people think I should bring it back. Do you think it would have been a little bit different if the governor had a lot of money to hand out to representatives and senators?
Well, that wouldn't make any difference to me because I
know you wouldn't take it, right? But
I can't speak to what would make other people make their decisions. I don't make my decisions based upon that. I make my decisions based upon what's right for the people of the Commonwealth. If the governor wants to, you'd have to probably dig into that with individual people. I don't behave that way. I mean, Joe, you know me, I think pretty well.
Right.
It's about what's right for the people that are paying the bill, and that's the citizens of the Commonwealth.
No, I wasn't asking. I was more or less asking you whether you agree with the governor's assessment that perhaps with some of your colleagues that might have made a difference.
I don't know.
Fred, there's 30 seconds left here before we have to let you go. I have a question. If Governor Corbett does not win in the fall, and you have to work with Tom Wolf in the fall, how's that going to work out? Are you guys going to work together?
Well, let me say this. I am still supportive of the governor, as I have been. I don't think that's been a secret to anybody. I have a lot of friends that are Democrats, and I work with them. Again, it's a matter of putting the people of the Commonwealth first and making sure we do their work. And I intend to do that no matter who I have to work with. But, I know the governor's been working hard, and we've accomplished a lot of things over the last 3.5 years.
Fred, we're out of time. Thank you so very much for taking the time this morning to call us from your trip, and drive safely, and thanks for pulling over.
Hey, thanks, Fred.
Thanks.
We'll take a break, and we'll be back after the news with more of On the Mark, and we have a very special guest who will be with us for most of the next hour on WKOK, Sunbury, Pennsylvania.
CBS News, I'm Frank Sedapani. More than 200 Gaza Strip Palestinians and one Israeli have been killed since the latest border war broke out last week, and the death toll could climb if, as expected, Israel steps up airstrikes against Hamas. CBS's Robert Berger in Jerusalem tells us about a new effort to stop the bloodshed.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is due to meet Egyptian and Hamas officials in Cairo to discuss a ceasefire. Abbas is emerging as a key mediator because he is a moderate who has relations with both Israel and Hamas. Abbas will be pushing for a key concession to Hamas, opening Gaza border crossings with Egypt and Israel.
Israel has been dropping leaflets and making phone calls telling tens of thousands of Palestinians to leave their homes in Gaza. In this country, California has approved new water use restrictions to fight the drought that's fueling wildfires and killing farm crops. Water wasters could be fined. A Sacramento woman has no problem with that.
We all need to encourage each other and say it's okay to have a brown lawn.
The rain California would love to get is falling in a lot of other places. Too much rain, in fact, in some of those places. The rain and wind did a lot of damage in Tewksbury, Massachusetts.
It was windy. I had actually just said, I kind of like a good thunderstorm, and all of a sudden it's a huge bang, and the whole house shook.
A typhoon named for the god of thunder has claimed at least a dozen lives in the Philippines. CBS's Seth Doan has the latest on that from Beijing.
Some areas received months' worth of rain in just hours, and residents were forced to navigate floodwaters. Heavy winds knocked down trees, blocking roadways and causing blackouts.
A UN report sees progress against the spread of HIV infections. Live Live to CBS News correspondent Heather Bosch.
Frank, this report is so optimistic. The head of UN Infectious Diseases says,
"We hope that by 2030 we can end the AIDS epidemic."
Mary Mays says by then the disease should be contained and under control if countries step up treatment and prevention to build on this trend. AIDS deaths have fallen by 35% since 2005. HIV infections dropped 38% since 2001. 35 million people are HIV positive.
The city of Denton, Texas, which sits on a huge natural gas reserve, has refused to block new permits for hydraulic fracturing. One woman claims the controversial drilling method that forces water, sand, and chemicals deep underground to free oil and gas has made her sick.
There was dust on everything. I couldn't go for my walks because I couldn't breathe.
A mineral rights owner defends fracking.
Separating fact from fiction is a big issue. I believe that mineral owners have the right to develop their property.
Treasury Secretary Lew says hundreds of cyber attacks against banks and financial institutions are part of a deliberate effort to damage the system and could cause harm. S&P futures are up 8 points. This is CBS News.
With thousands of brand new items, Staples now has more of the things you need every day.
Like what?
Like cleaning supplies for the break room.
Good thing. That fridge sort of smells like a wet dog.
And drinks and snacks, like Gatorade and Snickers bars.
So I can replace electrolytes while I cheat on my diet?
And retail supplies, like cash registers, shopping bags, and signs. Even hospital scrubs and disposable gloves.
I look like a hot surgeon in those.
With thousands of new products, your local Staples now has more than you'd ever expect. Staples, make more happen.
You are someone who doesn't compromise, and you're never willing to settle. So why are you wearing glasses with just any progressive lenses? See the difference with Verilux, the #1 progressive lens brand, and enjoy sharp vision and smooth transitions at any distance. Verilux is the only progressive lens brand with lenses designed using wave technology. Ask your eye care professional about Verilux, and never compromise your vision.
Russian investigators have detained a track supervisor and his assistant in connection with the Moscow subway derailment. That accident yesterday killed at least 21 people. The Pentagon, the CIA, and other well-known agencies may be inviting targets, but Chinese computer hackers seem to have other interests as well. CBS's Shannon Van Sant has the story from Beijing.
Law enforcement analysts say Chinese hackers have turned their attention to obscure federal agencies. Hacking intrusions were detected at the Government Printing Office and Government Accountability Office. Cybersecurity analysts say the intrusions are unusual and that hackers often target highly classified government agencies. Officials say it is unclear whether the hackers were operating on behalf of the Chinese government.
A nuclear plant in southern Japan could be the first to restart since the Fukushima meltdown 3 years ago. Officials granted preliminary approval for the restart after reviewing upgrades and safety improvements. Frank Sedapani, CBS News.
You've been thinking about moving over to solar power for your home. So are a lot of other people, which is why some power companies are pushing for extra fees to make up the difference. Is it finally happening? Is solar power actually becoming a threat to the old power conglomerates? Don't fund Big Power's losses while everybody else goes solar. Get caught in the middle, or go with a trusted local solar company and actually own it, and reduce your energy bill with no down payment, interest, or payments for a whole year. Get tax breaks and big monthly energy savings. Avoid falling behind and paying extra. Don't be the last one in line. Our nation's power supplies are shifting. Wait too long and you may wind up paying for it. Want to completely eliminate your power bill? Get all the tax incentives you're entitled to while you still can. And do it locally, because local is accountable. And we finance. Call 1-800-MY-SOLAR for a free in-home assessment. 1-800-MY-SOLAR.
My home, my savings. 1-800-MY-SOLAR.
News Radio 1070 WKOK presents On the Mark. It's a chance to voice your opinion on the events that affect life in the Susquehanna Valley. Call 1-800-795-9565 or email onthemark@wkok.com. Now, here are your hosts for On the Mark, Joe McGranahan and Than Mitchell.
Welcome back to On the Mark, brought to you by the Sunbury Motor Company, a family-owned dealership since 1915. 4th Streets in Sunbury, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Find out more about them at www.sunburymotors.com. That, of course, is on the Internet. We have a very interesting guest in the studio. She has patiently waited as we interviewed the governor and heard from State Representative Fred Keller. And we're going to talk about education for the balance of the program this morning. And you're bound to have some questions for our guest. And if you want to phone them in, you can do so at the Groninger Insurance toll-free hotline number, 1-800-795-9565, or email us at onthemark@wkok.com. Our email in basket is brought to you by the nice people at Lenape Solar and Sunbury, and they would be delighted to talk to you about any of your solar needs. Our guest this morning is Amy Morton. Good morning, Amy. Nice to have you with us.
Good morning.
Amy works at the CSIU. She has been a regional education, that is a regional education service agency. After serving in the Pennsylvania Department of Education as Executive Deputy Secretary and Deputy Secretary for Elementary and Secondary Education. Prior to those appointments, Amy was the Executive Director of the Capital Area Intermediate Unit, where she initiated and developed the Capital Area Online Learning Association that now serves thousands of students all across Pennsylvania. A leader in current Pennsylvania initiatives to personalize learning by leveraging technology solutions, Amy is known to her colleagues as a progressive, trustworthy, collaborative, and student-centered person. With 30 years' experience as a teacher, district administrator, intermediate unit, and state leader, Amy is relentless in her focus on improving student and staff performance through systemic and thoughtful implementation of high-yield strategies. Now,
wow!
How about that?
What the heck does that mean?
That means I care about kids.
Okay, that's the short answer to that question. We are at a crossroads in education in this country. I know Than has discussed many times the state and the governor, in his view, taking away money that was meant for education. What is the state of funding of education? I mean, do you have enough money to do the job now, or is it still coming up short?
Well, I think it's a very challenging situation, and what I started saying about 4 years ago, back when I was back at the intermediate unit south of here, I would tell our superintendents we just need to start to think about how to do school differently, because obviously we were in the throes of the recession, and thinking about how we could leverage technology, because simply continuing to fund education the way we have is not working for our taxpayers. And looking at, the level of state funding and the level of federal funding and what happened with things like stimulus dollars that came from the federal government but dried up right after Governor Corbett took office, made it that much more difficult. So I think what we have to look at is how can we invest differently in education in terms of how we use the staff that we have, because that's the greatest expense in education is the labor. It's about 70% of any district's budget.
Do you see the day coming when kids will be sitting in front of computers and there'll only be one teacher for like 200 kids?
Well, that day has already been here. Yeah. Not in our. No, it's here, but it's not everything that school needs to be. I mean, I think we need to define school differently in that it can take place anywhere. Learning can take place anywhere. But I think the human interaction is still a critical element of schooling. And while technology can accelerate some things, it doesn't replace some of the critical relationships that are formed through the mentoring that a teacher provides.
Is the cost-benefit ratio there today in education for the taxpayers?
Well, that's an interesting question in light of some of the cost-benefit analyses that I've done. When you look at going back to the role of technology, for example, you can actually create a full-time online student situation for about $5,000 a year. And yet that's not what the cost is to the taxpayer if you look at, for instance, cyber charter school costs, which are sometimes 2, 3, 4 times that amount per student, because the manner in which that legislation was passed and implemented created inequities in the system.
It seems to me that people who do not understand education, and I would say in many cases that would be our legislators, are making the rules and not asking educators what will work. Is that true, or am I just guessing at that?
I think there's an element of truth to that. When I'm kind of I always go back to my teaching days, and even when I was working at the state, one of my favorite things to do was to sit and meet with legislators or their staffers or testify, because it was an opportunity to help educate the legislators. They have a pretty significant task, and they have a lot of different topics that they have to know enough about to make intelligent decisions. And of course, my favorite legislators were the ones that were willing to take the time to learn, not just you know, the basics, but really dig down into the implications of some of the decisions they're making. If you look at the school code and what the legislators have done over decades relative to the rules that have to be followed by schools and educators, and then you decimate the Department of Education staff that has the obligation of enforcing those rules and helping people understand them, you have a challenging circumstance, not just at the district level, but at the state level as well.
Is there a, is it true that we could have classes of 40 children in the classroom, not with technology, but actually in the classroom, and they can learn as well as a class of 20? Does the classroom size matter?
There's a lot of research on class size. When I worked with Ron Tomales, our former Secretary of Education, he would often ask this question. It was a great question, and that is, would you rather have a class of 30, 35, maybe even 40 with a great teacher, or a class of 20 with a mediocre one? And almost hands down, everybody will say, we'll take the larger class with the better teacher. So a lot of effort was put into improving the quality. I've seen classes of 40 in actually in adjudicated youth settings with phenomenal teachers who find that they can operate a class effectively. I don't recommend it. As a teacher, I had about 150 students that I would carry on my rosters, but I was a high school teacher, so I met with about 30 at a time. Any more than that, and it's challenging to really get to know who your students are, what makes them tick, and understand how to best reach them educationally. But technology does facilitate an acceleration of learning, because you can actually customize your teaching better with technology than you can as an individual.
You're talking about customizing. Is that the same as personalization? Is that another word for that? Okay, well, then how does a teacher keep track of kids who are maybe progressing at different speeds and different levels? I mean, how do you tie that all together at the end of the day?
Well, we're engaged right now at the Central Susquehanna Intermediate Unit with an effort to help our districts, our 17 member districts, learn more about hybrid learning and how to really take advantage of some of the digital content that they've already purchased through vendors. And the way it works is that it's considered like computer-aided instructional decision-making. So when a student is working, let's say, at a laptop or an iPad or a desktop computer for part of their instructional day, the programming is such that it will respond to the input that the student has and then adjust accordingly, and then at the end of the day a teacher can get a report about how that student progressed in that area and then design the next day's instruction accordingly, or regroup the students based on the results of what might be generated through a computer, so that when they're able to provide small group instruction, they can do it so that they've put together a group of students who have the same needs.
Is that in all subject areas that works?
It can be done in all subject areas. There's actually a school down in Springford School District. They even renamed themselves the Spring City Hybrid Learning Center, and they have kindergarten through 5th grade, including the library. They use a hybrid approach where you combine small group instruction by the teacher with collaborative small groups and then independent small groups that are working at a computer. So it's the best of both worlds.
Well, I think one of the things that struck me as most interesting was the discussion about how the role, and we had Dr. DeMarco on the program a few months back, and he talked about the reversal, where now the student goes in and listens to the lecture and goes home and does the homework, and then reversing that, having the student go home and watch the lecture from the teacher and then the next day work in class on what was discussed. Is that something that's happening a lot in Pennsylvania? Or
It's definitely happening. I don't know the latest results of any surveys on it, but that's called flipped learning.
Yes, okay, that was
And I think because our kids are so tech savvy and they spend an awful lot of time watching YouTube. I mean, I have an 11-year-old stepson who spends far more time watching YouTube videos and, you know, things on an iPad, that the idea of having them watch something that's useful, like a lecture or a demonstration or an explanation of how to solve an equation or those kinds of things, and then come back and use the class time for the real collaborative efforts around problem solving and so forth, is a very good use of time.
How about age groups? Does it matter whether we're talking kindergarten or seniors in high school, or is it kind of the same all the way through?
It's actually very interesting. having had conversations with even our Senate Education Chair, who has grandchildren, both the previous one and the current one, Senator Picola and Senator Fulmer. They'll talk about their grandchildren who maybe are 3, 4, 5 years old at the time I was having the discussions, who just have a natural understanding of what to do with these devices, which is
Tell
always...
me about my 5-year-old grandson.
Yeah.
Has to show me things on my tablet.
Yeah, they pick it up and they immediately know what to do. There's a phrase that people use. They call them digital natives, and the rest of us are digital immigrants. So, yeah. It's,
I like that term.
Yeah.
Yesterday I downloaded a game, a SpongeBob game for my grandson, and
Mm-hmm.
he can't read. He can read some words, and he's getting better at reading, but he's going through this thing, and it's almost intuitive.
They automatically know what to do. I have that SpongeBob game on our iPad, and I get stressed out playing a video game. That. The funny thing is, a lot of teachers who still have a need to control what goes on in the classroom are losing out on the opportunity to learn from the students in their classes who can actually teach them how to make better use of the technology. You know, anymore almost everybody has a smartphone, and for a while school districts had policies about, you know, turn it off at the door, and you know, you become oppositional to the technology, when in fact there are a lot of applications out there for educationally sound use of a cell phone in a classroom. So for instance, being able to use it to do immediate responses to quizzes, to check for understanding. There's a great app called Poll Everywhere that allows you to do that in a, you know, you can turn that around in a couple minutes and immediately find out how students are doing, but they have to pull their cell phones out to do it.
Was the day ever going to come where there are no school buildings, you know, with things like Skype, and I'm sure eventually the technology, if it doesn't exist, will exist, where you can have a one-to-many two-way conversation video across the computer, across the internet? Will there ever come a day when we don't need buildings, where all education will be done with that kind of a teacher at a central location and the students from wherever they are?
I hope not.
Really? Okay,
that's the wish of a conservative who would like not to have to pay teachers. I would say.
No, they're still paying the teachers. I'm saying we're just not paying for the buildings.
Generally, I mean, when you think about the cost that goes into transporting students and the cost of maintaining a building, yes, there's a cost, but it doesn't mean, in my estimation, that if we were smart, we'd start thinking about how to use our school buildings, which are taxpayer funded, in ways that are more community-wide. So, for instance, in the urban areas, you have school buildings that are used as health centers. You have school buildings that are used as gathering places for a lot of things, not just for school. You know, controversially, you could say, you know, why do we have a school library and then a public library? That's a very controversial topic. I don't want to go there. But when you start to think about how to utilize our resources more effectively, the idea of eliminating a gathering place for people for the sake of learning kind of defies centuries of history.
Our guest this morning is Amy Morton. Amy is at the CSIU. She has a varied history in education and certainly is well knowledgeable on her topic. We invite your calls or comments. If you have a question for her, 1-800-795-9565 is our Groninger Insurance toll-free hotline number, or email us at onthemark@wkok.com. We'll take a brief break and we'll be right back.
The dog days of summer are here. And that means one thing. When the temperatures go up, the prices come down. At Sunbury Motors Kia. If you like it hot, there's the Race Sleek 2014 Optima starting at $20,860 with 0% financing for up to 60 months. That's hot. Or the iconic Hip Hamster Soul from $14,990. Let's not forget Kia's award-winning SUV, the 2015 Sorento, with rebates and discounts up to $4,000 starting at $22,913. Remember, all new Kias come with a 10-year, 100,000-mile limited powertrain warranty with 85 new vehicles to choose from. The hottest deals on the hottest cars in all of Central PA are at Sunbury Motors Kia on the Strip in Hummels Wharf, or at sunburymotors.com. Selling more cars, satisfying more customers since 1915.
Tax and tags extra. All applicable Kia customer rebates apply. KMF bonus cash and financing and well-qualified customers.
Hello, this is Justin Charles from Lenape Solar. Did you know that through energy savings of almost $5 million per year, our customers are saving the environment the equivalent of over 98 million miles of driving and eliminating the annual carbon dioxide emissions of over 5,600 homes each year? Do you want to know how to be a part of these amazing numbers? Call us at 286-1496 or visit us online at Facebook or lenapesolar.com today and find out more about our exclusive Buy American partners for solar energy and energy-efficient lighting upgrades.
Appliances don't always keep humming along. Sometimes the washer won't spin, or the dishwasher stops mid-cycle. What do you do? Visit APW Sunbury. They carry all kinds of parts from small to large for every name and type of appliance. If you don't see it in stock, Jerry will gladly order it for you. Save money and fix it yourself with APW in the Peters Appliance Building on Market Street, Sunbury. Show those appliances who's boss, because you're always covered with parts from APW. Venture back in time to after Gettysburg at the 2014 Iron Heritage Festival, July 18th through 20th in downtown Danville. This Friday night at 6, see James Getty present the Gettysburg Address. Then enjoy the parade stepping off at 7 with the American Legion Honor Guard, Abe Lincoln, the Confederation of Union Generals, and their ladies too. Saturday, the great writer Jeff Sherraw will sign copies of his books at 3:30. General and Mrs. Robert E. Lee appear at 10:30, 3:30, and 6. For a full schedule, visit ironheritagefestival.net.
Daddy, can I have the keys?
Someday, your little one will want to drive.
Dad, can I have the keys?
And now that they've gone from car seats to car keys, you can only hope they'll drive safely. Go beyond telling your kids to look both ways. Tell them not to talk or text while driving. And if they drink, call you 24/7.
This message brought to you by the stations of Sunbury Broadcasting Corporation, including News Radio 1070 WKOK and Sealands Grove Ford, proud supporters of Susquehanna Smart Drive.
Ring, ring goes the bell. The cook in the lunchroom ready to sell.
Well, we don't have the cook in the lunchroom with us today, but we do have a lovely young lady named Amy Morton who is working very hard on education. She is the Chief Academic Officer at the Central Susquehanna Intermediate Unit, and we're discussing education this morning. We invite your calls and comments, and we certainly invite you to watch us on our webcam. Our director, producer, Kevin Herr, has spent a lot of time and effort achieving video excellence on this website, and we invite you to go to the online link at On the Mark at WKOK.com.
And it'll get better every day.
Every day. And
Kevin works on it every day.
It'll be a lot better next week when Mark's back and we're not on, and
some people will have hair, not just our guests.
Dave, you have a question for our guest. Good morning. You're on the Mark.
Hi, Dave.
I got a couple questions. You know, I heard people talking. We go to a coffee club, and I heard these people talking about teaching their kids at home, that they're going to homeschool them. And I thought to myself, now how do you just choose yourself? Do they have to have permission to have that done? And if they do, where do they get the books? And how do they prove that these kids are actually being homeschooled?
Okay. Do you have another question, or you want that one answered first?
Well, answer that one first,
Sure.
and then that might lead to my other one.
All right, go ahead.
Sure. There is a contingent of parents who choose to teach their kids at home, and there actually are very specific rules and regulations about how that happens. When a parent wants to do that, first of all, they must have a high school diploma or equivalent to qualify. Then they need to submit to the district in which they live a series of objectives that they intend to have their children meet. They need to be aligned to the state's standards. Then during the course of the year, the student needs to maintain a portfolio of what they have accomplished in regard to those objectives, and at the end of the year, the parent is responsible for securing the services of a certified teacher to review the portfolio, and they do that independently, and then they have to submit that portfolio for review to the district, and then the district undertakes a review to verify that the student has documentation that they've learned. In the course of the years of homeschooling, there's also requirements for the student at some points along the way to take a approved standardized test just to make sure that they're gauging the learning in accordance with where they are age and grade level. But yeah, it's highly regulated.
Sounds highly structured. Does that answer your question, Dave?
Okay, that answers that part. All right, now say the girl's coming up of school age to the first grade. She doesn't register as that. She's just going to teach her at home. Who's going to verify that she's being taught at home? In other words, if I don't register her for school, how are they going to know that she's being done at school? And how many grades can she go like that without them finding out?
Okay, Dave, we're going to have her answer your question. Thanks for calling. Okay.
Well, compulsory schooling begins actually at age 8. Kindergarten's always been optional. There's an effort that gets put forth annually by the school districts under federal law the Individuals with Disability Education Act that requires something called child find, and so there's an effort to identify through advertising and promoting access to schools any student who has special needs. I'm sure that there's always going to be a few students who are never found, but given tax rolls and those kinds of things, there's an obligation on the part of both the parent and the school district to identify school-age children.
Homeschooling becomes a real job, doesn't it? When a parent decides to homeschool, it's an obligation.
Sounds like there's a lot more to it than I thought there was in terms of what they have to demonstrate. I mean, what are the benefits? Are there benefits to homeschooling?
Well, there are, from the point of view that if you're a family that travels a lot, you're not tied down to the compulsory attendance rules because you've got the child with you. That's one of the appeals of cyber learning at this point as well. There's, in my experience, where I was the homeschool supervisor, which is not a full-time job, it's on top of everything else you do, you do occasionally run across some challenging situations. And this is another rule that educators must follow. For instance, there was one situation I ran across where the purpose in keeping the child at home for schooling was to avoid any evidence of the abuse that child was undergoing, because we have an obligation to report any suspected abuse. That's the exception, certainly not the rule. But a lot of folks do not like the structures of school, or maybe have issues with some of the things that they think their child's going to have to comply with at school, so they choose to homeschool.
We have another call. Tony, you're on the mark from Shamokin.
Morning.
Good morning. Yeah, I went to school. Naturally, I went to school. But I finally remember every teacher I ever had. I mean, I had a minor problem with the boardman, but I made it through at the end of the year. And there's a guy out there listening probably had the same minor problem I did. But we had the same teachers. They taught. Nobody talked about alternatives, objectives. They talked about what your subject matter was.
The 3 R's, right, Tony?
And your guess, as a educator, wouldn't you rather be teaching a class and teaching kids rather than out talking to legislators, talking funding?
We'll ask her your question, Tony. She's heard your question.
So the short answer to that is yes.
You'd rather be a teacher, yeah.
But the reality of it is, even back when I started teaching in the early 1980s, I was really unaware of how much of a business education had become, and the lobbying and the interest groups and the, even just edubusiness, I'll call it, in the same way we have agribusiness, we have edubusiness. And so there's a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes that are, especially with in my estimation, the intrusion of the federal government's role in some ways. In some ways it's positive, but in a lot of ways it has had a negative impact. The reality of it is somebody who's actually been in a classroom and understands the realities of teaching and remembers fondly, the kinds of things that our caller is talking about. I feel, and my kids have always questioned why I do the things I do, but I feel an obligation sometimes to help educate those who are making really significant decisions about what it's like in a classroom. They ought to know the realities of it, and that's why I spend time talking to those kind of folks.
Well, you mentioned just there the role of the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
What is the federal government doing for or to education, and which do you think it is, for or to?
Well, I was just talking about this with some colleagues yesterday about the difference between what it was like in a classroom in 1983 when I started versus today, and much of the change can be attributed to the role the federal government has taken actually significantly under George Bush II, with the No Child Left Behind Act that instituted this testing across all states to determine whether or not students were proficient in math and reading primarily, and now science. And so the nature of that testing has caused people to use those test scores, which aren't the sum and substance of everything that goes on in school, they're just a fraction of it, to then determine whether they think they have good schools or bad schools. And there's a lot of other factors that should influence one's opinion besides a standardized test score, because only certain things can be tested with a standardized test. So I think the negative is that there's an overemphasis on testing because people have a knee-jerk reaction to the judgments that are made as a result of test scores, so they put a lot of emphasis in the test and sometimes can lose sight of some of the bigger issues that we deal with as teachers, because we don't test things like speaking and listening, and those aren't part of the test.
What about Common Core?
Well, the Common Core, I think in some ways establishes something positive from the point of view that you have consistency for those students who are transitional. When I taught in Carlisle for 10 years, we had a change in our student population by 20% because of the Army War College. So we had kids that had traveled all over, not just the country, but the world. So in country, it's helpful to know that at certain points along the way, kids should have demonstrated proficiency in certain areas. And the Common Core was intended to do that. It was actually the brainchild of the National Governors Association, so it really emanated from the state level, not the federal level. In Pennsylvania, we really feel strongly about local control, so we said, sure, we'll look at the Common Core, but we have our own PA core standards that are very much aligned to the Common Core, but give us our own governance over those standards.
There's been a lot of debate about that in certain reading programs. I know in the Chambersburg School District, I've been following a debate over an administrator who was demoted because of supposedly support for some sort of test or reading program. Why is education, I mean, is this stuff good or bad? I mean, isn't there some subjective way we can do this without having all the upheaval to find out what works and what doesn't?
Well, I think there's a lot of people who know what works. It just takes a lot of investment of time and effort and sometimes money to make it happen, but change is hard. So a lot of people like to continue to do what they've always done, even in the face of doing something different that could be better because the research proves it. In the end, what we need to do is make sure our kids are reading. We need to make sure we have conversations with our children. We want to make sure that as parents we give kids an opportunity to learn how to manage money because it helps teach math skills. I mean, there's a lot of things that we know are helpful without having huge debates over whether the statement of the standard is what we want. People can take something simple and turn it into something complex and goofy.
We had a discussion last week, and I just wondered about your comment on this. I think that when students come out of school or go into school or are in school, they're all so different.
Mm-hmm.
Can we call them a product? The person that I was talking to was talking about the schools as a business and the students as products. And I said, you know, I don't like the idea, because if that's a product, every product is different. And you can't have that. Maybe at GM you can, but here you can't have every product being different and call it a product, can you?
Right. It's not manufacturing, obviously. There's a fellow that has made a national and international reputation for having changed his mind about that point of view, named Jamie Folmer, who used to give speeches about schools being businesses and putting out products. And the reality of it is, whoever comes through that door is who the teachers have an obligation to teach. You don't get to turn them away because they don't meet your standards of quality for eligibility as part of the manufacturing process. You take them where they are, and you hopefully get them as far as you can in the time that you have with them. So the one thing I would say, though, that we don't want to lose sight of, and I feel strongly about this as a former social studies or history teacher or whatever we want to call that, is that part of school is to assimilate folks into what it means to be a citizen in the United States. And I think that's a worthy cause, but it's not tested, so it sort of loses in the priorities of where we spend our time and money.
Well, that's a very interesting point. Time and money are certainly two of the things that concern us conservatives about the school districts. I mean, we want to make sure that we're getting our dollar's worth of value for every dollar that's spent.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk a lot about teacher salaries, and the governor, of course, was talking about pension, and certainly teachers' pensions are one of the things that are a concern. And I know that there was a superintendent down in Washington, D.C., who wanted to do some things, was going to trade some things off in return for, let's say, loosening up the tenure rules.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned earlier that your colleagues said they'd rather have 40 kids with one good teacher rather than 20 kids with a mediocre teacher. What about the situation where we get 40 kids with a mediocre teacher? I mean, how do we get the best performance out of our teachers? Are we requiring enough of them, or are they giving too much already and we shouldn't ask for any more?
First of all, when it comes to compensation for teachers, you know, the best teachers probably aren't paid enough and the worst teachers are overpaid. I mean, that's an old adage. When I was teaching, it certainly wasn't a 9-month job and a 7.5-hour day. It's a lot more than that when you're really dedicated to your profession. There's actually lawsuits that are pending right now in California, and I believe one that's coming up in New York, where parents or communities are in litigation over the fact that the nation of last in, first out, you know, seniority rules is really having a detrimental impact on their students because of just because you're a veteran teacher doesn't make you the best teacher, and just because you're a new teacher doesn't mean you're not just as good as some of the ones who've been around a while, although we always have a lot to learn. So I think that's a situation that is sort of being addressed with the new teacher evaluation tools that are in place in Pennsylvania as a result of Act 82 from 2012. And that essentially says, let's not just go by seniority. Let's look at, first of all, are you demonstrating behaviors that we know are in accordance with what good teaching looks like? Secondly, are you producing scores that demonstrate that students are learning as a result of having been taught by you? And overall, what is your impact on the students that you teach? And those factors are all being taken into consideration, and over the next 3 years they have a much greater impact on teacher evaluation than they have, which creates more accountability for the teachers to do their job well.
How can we change, if people need to change, tenure and unions? It seems to me that that's one of the places where my argument about good teachers go away, because they've got double protection. There was a darn good reason for tenure at one time. Maybe there still is, but with a union and tenure, is that a good thing?
Well, in the interest of full disclosure, I have tenure and I've never joined the union.
Okay.
So I would suggest that tenure is no longer necessary if you have the support of your union, and I would also suggest that the role that unions have played historically have been significant in improving the conditions of workers everywhere in some ways. But I think sometimes one can get a little carried away with oneself in light of the fact that we live in the reality of challenging financial circumstances. A couple of years ago, many of the districts and teachers in those districts recognized that fiscal reality and took a pay freeze and did some things that demonstrated, their integrity relative to the realities of the situation. I think it's always a balancing act, and I think the negotiations, and particularly in this region right now, have been challenging in light of how far apart we are between the boards and the union leadership.
Our guest this morning is Amy Morton. She's the Chief Academic Officer for the Central Susquehanna Intermediate Unit. If you have a question for her, give us a call at 1-800-795-9565. Our toll-free hotline number brought to you by the Groninger Insurance Agency, or email us at onthemark@wkok.com. Our email in basket brought to you by Lenape Solar, and the entire program brought to you by the wonderful folks at Sunbury Motor Company. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back.
For more than 3 years now, Radio PA and PAMatters.com have brought you exclusive monthly conversations with Governor Tom Corbett. It's your chance to have the Governor of Pennsylvania answer your questions and comments on the issues affecting you.
The state has had a very difficult time as a legislature to come up with the resolve to deal with this head on. I said when I ran the first time, I'm going to make the tough decisions, and that's what people want you to make.
Let us answer your question on our next Ask the Governor program. Go to PAMatters.com today and click on the Ask the Governor link at the top of the page.
Important pieces of legislation that play into the budget, not the least of which is the pension issue.
PAMatters.com is also home to exclusive video clips from Ask the Governor, a show honored as Best Public Affairs and Best Talk Show by the Pennsylvania Association of Broadcasters and the PA Associated Press Broadcasters Association.
I'm Governor Tom Corbett. Please join me on Radio PA and PAMatters.com for a discussion on the issues facing our Commonwealth. Submit your questions or comment today.
Ask the Governor on PAMatters.com.
It's time to think about how to promote your business, to brand your business as a quality establishment customers trust. How do you set yourself apart from the crowd?
Hi, this is Erica Shames, publisher of Susquehanna Life magazine. 20 years ago, I started the magazine to educate people about why life here is so unique and to create a high-quality advertising venue for your business or organization. The old adage, you are the company you keep, holds true. When you think about where to advertise, think Susquehanna Life magazine, and here's why. Your ad in Susquehanna Life is seen by more than 45,000 people regionally. Our reader surveys tell us 77% of those readers buy from our advertisers. Most people keep their copies of Susquehanna Life indefinitely. Bottom line, it makes sense to advertise in an upscale magazine with the experience and integrity to safeguard and build your brand. Advertise in Susquehanna Life magazine. Call 1-800-232-1670 for more information.
They just had one. Now they're having one again. Community Aid in Selinsgrove is having another huge sale. It's the Community Aid 8 Days of Summer Savings. The entire store is on sale now right through the 20th. Everything, including brand name clothing, household items, and more, is a full 50% off. But it's for 8 days only, so don't put it off. Once it's over, it's over. Plan your trip now to Community Aid's biggest and longest sale ever. The Community Aid 8 Days of Summer Savings. Now through the 20th at 1070 Susquehanna Trail, Selinsgrove. Neighbors helping neighbors.
Our guest this morning, and she is an educator, no doubt about that, is Amy Morton. She's the Chief Academic Officer at the Central Susquehanna Intermediate Unit. She is willing to stick around for a while longer, and we're having such an interesting discussion. We're glad to have her do that. And we have a caller who has a question. Andrew, you're on the mark.
Good morning. I was unfortunately not able to hear the whole show with the guest, so maybe you already addressed kind of this issue or question, but I'm a parent of 2 school-age children. I enjoyed my years in school, went to college. I have a master's degree. So I have an interest in education, and I've known teachers over the years, many teachers, and I think there's something that's really difficult in trying to assess teacher how do you assess teacher evaluation based on their students' performance when students' performance has so much more to do with socioeconomic realities, what their home life is like. I mean, my wife's a social worker. When she first got into that line of work and saw that there were homes where there was not a single scrap of reading material in the home, that's like one of the #1 indicators of what a child's performance is going to be like in school, as well as their social behavior. I mean, you all have them for a limited number of hours a day, and you do your best, but really, without the home support, there's only so much you can do, and I don't want teachers being badly evaluated if they have a class that's full of children who are not getting any wider support. I don't think there's an easy answer, but how
not
do
an
you
easy
do
question
without
either,
an
Andrew.
educator?
Okay, that wasn't an easy question, but I think our guest has heard it, and we'll have her respond.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andrew.
You make an excellent point, because education does begin in the home. Unfortunately, some of what students learn in the home is not helpful in the school, given some of the homes that it sounds like your wife has experienced. The reality of it is and I think you'll appreciate this response, the piece that is used to evaluate teachers primarily when it comes to students' proficiency is based on growth. It's not whether or not they have achieved a certain score or not achieved it. It's basically partially up to the teacher, too, to decide, but it takes the student where they begin with some kind of a pre-assessment and looks at how far, given the limited time that teacher has with the student, how far have they taken them. So the evaluative component primarily for teachers under the new evaluation system is based on growth, not on absolute achievement.
How about graduation? I keep seeing graduation. Well, graduation is going to be tied to the economic and social issues, isn't it? So it doesn't matter how many people graduate from a high school. It matters how much they have progressed.
Well, yes and no. There are some static numbers that have to be reported and are used as part of a fraction of the evaluation of a teacher, but it goes to an overall school score called the School Performance Profile, which was rolled out last year. And graduation is a pretty good indicator of future success. So it's one of the factors that gets taken into account. The nice thing is, in Pennsylvania, we don't make an assumption that every student is going to be able to graduate in the 4 years that is typical. So we allow for a 5-year graduation rate and a 6-year graduation rate, so that you're not penalized simply because you recognize as an educator that a student needs more time in order to achieve what's necessary for graduation.
I can remember when I was in elementary school, and not having been, in all instances, the smartest kid in the room, I always sweated out whether or not I was going to pass or flunk. You know, I can remember getting that final report card, and then it would say promoted to grade so-and-so, and I'm sure there were kids who were held back. I mean, do we hold kids back anymore, or does everybody get the participation medal and they just get pushed on to the next teacher?
No, we still retain students in certain grades. There's a body of research that indicates that if a student isn't reading by the end of grade 3, you're going to have an at-risk student who's probably going to cost the taxpayer a lot more in the long run. So there's a huge effort to start students sooner. particularly if they're not getting supports from home. So we have a lot of pre-kindergarten and preschool and early intervention programs that begin before a student even arrives at kindergarten. But there's also a lot of innovative approaches called looping or multi-age classes, so that you're keeping students together in a way that addresses their needs according to what their needs are, not their age or their grade level.
Now, that's what they used to do when I was in high school.
Yeah, it's called the one-room schoolhouse.
Well, no, but I mean, they used to group kids together according to their academic ability. The brightest kids were together. Those kids who needed a little more help were together. And that kind of fell out of favor. But it seems to me that makes more sense for a teacher, because she's dealing with fewer things that she has to customize all across the board. Why is that coming back now, are you telling me?
That's still a heated debate, because there's conflicting research on whether or not grouping students by ability is better versus grouping students so that there's a mixture of ability and all students are exposed to different kinds of ability and disability. There's sort of self-selection in high schools. So if a student is picking an honors course versus a more general course, or they're going into a advanced placement program, you know, through the College Board's syllabus, or if they're taking advantage, let's say, of the Bloomsburg University's new STEM program for high school students for science, technology, engineering, and math, you know, that self-selection sort of creates some homogeneity in the composition of the class.
I like that word. That Mark's going to use that next week, I'll bet you.
No, it's not a made-up word. It's a real one. We do have an email.
Yes, we do have an email here. And our writer asks, is there a push to run schools like businesses? I see that Ms. Morton's title is Chief Academic Officer, not Provost or Dean. It is right out of Gordon Gekko-esque corporate America, CEO, CFO, COO. You're the CAO.
Yeah, I'm one of the CAOs. We have a Chief Administrative Officer also. That's a good question in the light of the fact that I work for an intermediate unit, because an intermediate unit is essentially a business. We have our line item got zeroed out in the state budget, which was only a fraction of our overall operations. But as Chief Academic Officer, my role is to oversee a lot of the programs that serve disaffected youth, pregnant and parenting teens, incarcerated youth. I have a lot of program managers who that's the population with whom they work, because school didn't work for them or they didn't work for school, so they're in a different setting in some cases for their education, and that's why I'm called Chief Academic Officer. But an intermediate unit is a business, and I think that's not really lost on anyone who's in the intermediate unit world.
Well, let me ask you this question, and it kind of cuts to I guess to the core of the issue. You have school boards who supposedly run schools. They run them differently. They have different funding bases. You have the state injecting a certain amount of requirements, most of them unfunded obligations on the part of the school district. You have the feds jumping in there saying you have to jump through these hoops. How is education ever going to work when there's nobody in actual charge? Everybody's got a piece of the pie.
Well, it's almost as if everybody who went to school thinks they understand how school works, and so they have an opinion about it. It's
that
one of the
makes me angry, because I went to school and I have no idea how you guys do what you do, and I don't think anybody else does either.
You have no idea about very many things.
That's true, but you need the education to know what's going on.
It's one of the, it's one of our things we have in common as a population, is that we all experience school, so we all have an opinion about it one way or the other, generally speaking. There are a lot of people giving directions to what's supposed to be happening in schools, and I think that speaks to the role that leadership takes within that school. You know, in many ways, a principal's job is almost to protect their staff from too much outside interference so that they can focus on the students and getting their job done. And a superintendent's job really becomes a lot of conversations with board members, attorneys, personnel matters, budget issues, negotiating the myriad of laws that they have to ensure they're abiding by, creating policies according to what the laws tell you have to have policies for. So it has become, not that it never was this, but it has become more and more trying to choreograph how you ensure that your staff is able to stay focused on their core mission, which is, helping children learn.
That's interesting, because you're talking about the superintendent doing all kinds of other things from education. That's the reason for assistant superintendents and assistant principals and so forth.
Sure.
Because they're the ones that have to come in every day and do educational things.
Yes. When you have so many different pockets of money that have to be administered and for which you're held accountable. So, for instance, federal funding, there's at least 3 or 4 federal funding streams that come into a district that have to be audited and accounted for and run, spent in accordance with program requirements. There's line items in the state budget, like there used to be the Accountability Block Grant. I think it's the Ready to Learn grant now. All require some sort of paperwork. Students whose English is their second language, you have to administer a home language survey. I mean, there's just a lot of rules that have to be attended to, a lot of nitty-gritty kinds of things. So between the principals and the directors of curriculum or special education directors or HR directors, and a lot of our local districts, there's maybe 1 or 2 lead administrators, and they assume those responsibilities. They don't necessarily have individuals with specific assignments. They have a superintendent, a business manager, and 2 principals.
Well, you're making it sound like Tony, who called us earlier in the program, was right when he said, why don't we just go back to the little red schoolhouse? There was a lot less red tape and a lot less paperwork.
Yeah.
Kids still learn, didn't they?
You know, when I was a little girl, my mother always had us out doing interesting things. She still is a phenomenal parent. And one of the things we did one summer was we got paid 75 cents a day to be part of a tourist attraction in Conrad Weiser, where we were students in a one-room schoolhouse. And we brought our lunch in a pail, and we wore, long dresses, and my brother wore suspenders and jeans. And we experienced that on a daily basis, and it really was like school. And there was a lot to be said for that. It didn't really matter what your age or your size or anything was. You sat in the front row, and it was your turn to learn according to what was evident about your learning already. And in many ways, we're doing that. I wish we could erase the idea of sorting and ranking kids for the purpose of awarding them and just group them according to how they're going to learn best.
We have to take a break, and we have 2 phone calls pending. So we'll take our break, and we'll be back with more of On the Mark.
Actually, Joe, hang on one second. We're going to take that first call first.
The first call
yes.
first? The one that just hung up?
That's why we were going to take it first. But that's okay. We'll just change it up now.
We're going to take the break, or what am I doing now?
Let's take the break.
All right, we'll take the break.
Thanks for following along.
You're welcome.
The dog days of summer are here.
And that means one thing.
When the temperatures go up, the prices come down. At Sunbury Motors Kia. If you like it hot, there's the Race Sleek 2014 Optima starting at $20,860 with 0% financing for up to 60 months.
That's hot.
Or the iconic Hip Hamster Soul from $14,990. Let's not forget Kia's award-winning SUV, the 2015 Sorento, with rebates and discounts up to $4,000 starting at $22,913. Remember, all new Kias come with a 10-year, 100,000-mile limited powertrain warranty with 85 new vehicles to choose from. The hottest deals on the hottest cars in all of Central PA are at Sunbury Motors Kia on the Strip in Hummels Wharf or at sunburymotors.com. Selling more cars, satisfying more customers since 1915.
Tax and tags extra. All applicable Kia customer rebates apply. KMF bonus cash and financing to well-qualified customers.
Here's something to think about. How do you know if your insurance is the right price? Have you ever had your insurance reviewed? Do you remember when it was reviewed? And are you getting all the discounts you deserve? Let Groninger Insurance Agency give you a free, no-obligation second opinion on your auto, home, or business insurance. Give the Groninger Insurance Agency a call today at 570-473-8107. They're proud to represent the Erie Insurance Group. It's true, if you're not insured by Groninger Insurance, you're probably paying too much.
Appliances don't always keep humming along. Sometimes the washer won't spin, or the dishwasher stops mid-cycle. What do you do? Visit APW Sunbury. They carry all kinds of parts from small to large for every name and type of appliance. If you don't see it in stock, Jerry will gladly order it for you. Save money and fix it yourself with APW in the Peters Appliance Building on Market Street, Sunbury. Show those appliances who's boss, because you're always covered with parts from APW.
From a backyard blow-off barbecue to a black tie event, Chestnut Street Deli is your custom caterer. Class reunions, weddings, business meetings, brunches, birthday parties, anniversaries. You get the idea. No matter the event, Chestnut Street Deli can cater it. They customize your food items to your events from their huge menu, which includes their homemade desserts, or pick up a party tray. And if you need a place to rent the deli. Chestnut Street Deli, 550 Chestnut Street, Sunbury. They cater to you. Call 988-2230. Like them on Facebook.
Welcome back to On the Mark. Cindy, you have a question for our guest. Good morning.
Good morning. Over the last few days, there's been a sometimes heated discussion about
the illegal alien children in the United States. And one of the issues related to immigrant children is their impact on the local public schools. Could you address the issues of the programmatic obligations of the school district, the staffing that's involved in meeting those obligations, and the budget costs that come along with that?
Okay,
Thanks.
she's heard your question. And
Thank you,
she'll answer
Cindy.
it. Thank you, Cindy.
Sure. When a child arrives at a school district to register, the school district is obligated to take that child as a student regardless of their status. So I think that answers part of your question. And then if that child is not proficient in English, which is often difficult to tell because often children are verbal in English but can't read or write in English, the district is obligated to assess the needs of that child when it comes to English as a second language and then provide services. There is federal money that is available to help underwrite the cost of supplementing the child's education for English as a second language called Title III money, but the school district has a responsibility to provide language instruction in English for the children that come to them.
So it would be an expense for the school district, somewhat covered by the feds?
That is exactly how to sum that up. And in fact, some of the school funding commission work that I've been involved in, even back when Senator Rhodes was around, has recognized that expense and attempted to create formulas for funding schools based on specific types of needs, and English language learners, or ELL, is one of those factors that is taken into account.
Why do we? I'm sorry. I was just going to say Amy Morton has been our guest. We've held her far longer than we told her we would, and she has another meeting to go to. But I want to give her the last word. Amy, is there anything you'd like to say
Buzz
to wrap
is
this up?
back. Buzz is back, and we
All right.
did shortchange Buzz.
Buzz, we'll take you. You're our last caller. Good morning.
Thanks, guys. The cell service around Snydertown's not good. This refers to an earlier part of your conversation. The other day I was standing with a group of 20-somethings, and for whatever reason we were talking about presidents of the United States, and somebody said, well, who was the second president? And I said, John Adams. And the two of the three smartphone people had barely gotten into Google before I answered that. And so my question to you is, having phones in the classroom, is it more important to know where to find something than it is to know something?
All right, she's heard your question. Thanks, Buzz.
Thank you.
Thanks, Buzz.
And my quick answer is I think there's certain things that everybody ought to know, and I used to make those non-negotiable in my class. I'd ask them on every test until I was sure the kids knew them. And then there's other things that, given the how knowledge multiplies so rapidly in this day and age, the skill of learning how to find information, but not only that, how to determine the veracity of that information is kind of a critical skill. So media literacy is completely a requirement from my point of view, so that you're not just believing everything you see and hear.
Well, we're not getting, that bothers me too, that we're not teaching kids to cursive writing anymore. That bothers me a great deal.
Well, it's interesting. My relatives feel the same way because they couldn't, a card that they wrote to my stepson could not be deciphered by my stepson because he couldn't read cursive writing.
It is gone, though, isn't it?
It's a throwback, I think, in the same way the slide rule is, but, you know, there's an emphasis on the kinds of things that are critical to, you have to establish priorities. And if you ask me for my last word, and I'll give it to you,
Okay.
there's so many hours in the day for all of us, and there's so much money in the bank for all of us personally and as a corporate body of citizens. And I think in the end, people's voices need to be heard about what their priorities are, but it needs to be an educated voice that is speaking, so that, or a knowledgeable or a well-informed voice, so that as we're trying to establish our priorities around how to spend time in school and how to spend money in school, that it's well-informed by the values that our society promotes. And I think everybody should take an active role in speaking with their board members about the decisions they make for schooling.
We wound up holding you right to the end of the program. Amy Morton, Chief Academic Officer at the CSIU, we thank you so very much for giving us so much of your time this morning.
I'm writing a note now because she's late for a meeting and she needs a note to get in.
Well, I'll sign it too. Please excuse Amy. The dog ate her homework.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Than. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks,
Thank you,
thanks
Amy,
for coming,
very
Amy.
much.
We really appreciate you being with us. Than and I will be back with On the Mark again tomorrow.
Open
It'll be
day.
an open day, so feel free to give us a call if there are any follow-up issues, and we're going to have Amy back in the program again sometime in the future to update us on where the educational process is. Than, always nice seeing you. Look
Great
forward
to
to
see
seeing
ya.
you again tomorrow. Our wonderful crack producer, Kevin. Thank you, Kevin, for your hard work. We invite you to join us tomorrow morning. morning at 8:30 on The Mark on WKOK Radio in Sunbury, Pennsylvania.